Chapter 3. The Mechanics of Motion. So far we have examined the torus as the ideal model, the spiral nature of electromagnetic waves, and a view of the universe as an ideal field. Yet all of these definitions were predominantly still and unmoving. Therefore, motion must now be discussed. There is only motion. Motion gives rise to all phenomena, from magnetism to strong forces, simply by recursive and cumulative interactions. The first thing to move was the silence. In complete stillness, nothing perceivable exists, because perception can only be had by relating one movement to another. This first and only energy, ZP energy, is so fine that it can flow through any quote-unquote particle that it creates. Even though it is not divisible into any known unit, for simplicity's sake, a unit of this pure energy, smaller than anything known, will be imagined. Now imagine the totality of stillness in total balance. Then imagine it as one unit that has moved. The instant one thing moves in a system, all things must move, however slightly. Thus, the entire universe is moving as a consequence of this initial unit. This unit is therefore the origin, or the prime mover. What caused it to move is irrelevant, because there was never such a beginning. Only limits of the human mind cause it to see such linear restrictions. Thus, only for example is such a quote-unquote beginning presented. This movement causes an instant and total chain reaction, because all of the units are touching each other. Imagine a jar of tiny, soft rubber spheres. It is their ability to flex that allows for motion and disallows a void to ever form. For a jar of hard marbles, unable to flex, would be an immovable crystalline solid. When moved, the unit pushes on units ahead of it, causing an energy density gain in the direction traveled. This transfers part or all of its movement energy to all touching units, which in turn likewise transfer it to all other units in the system. This cycle continues until the space where the initial unit first occupied is filled instantly by the last particle moved, never allowing a void. However, the last particle moved restarts the entire cycle over again because of the potential void which its movement has now created. Thus, the potential void is infinitely being filled and recreated by movement itself. Movement is thus a cycle of propagating energy density fluctuations within a medium. This propagating energy density cycle causes a spiral vortex as seen at any drain, which results from its composing units moving towards the drain, the potential void, yet impeded by all units ahead of them which slightly deflect their straight path into a spiral path. However, this happens in 3 dimensions, unlike a 2-dimensional drain. The initial movement erupts a spiraling energy density fluctuation from the center in the direction traveled, which cascades in a spiral back to the center potential void. See image 11 and realize that the axis is the direction of movement. Thus, every particle is an energy density fluctuation, which is a vortex, and when moved also causes a vortex in the carrying medium directly proportionate to the force of its accumulated movement or energy density, like the moving charged particle and its surrounding spiral magnetic field. All instances clearly obeying a recursive application of the ideal field model. When such a motion cycle is well balanced in proportion of a carrying medium, its energy does not dissipate and the cycle is constant. This is the origin of bound ZP energy, matter, a vortex composed of multiple units which act as one unit. They are literally the force of movement trapped in a repetitive cycle. These particles or concretions of a medium now distort the flow of the unbound or free energy around them proportionate to the specific pattern, geometry, of their individual energy density fluctuation cycle, which creates their exterior quote-unquote texture. This disturbance may in turn spawn other vortices as eddy currents, which may also balance and become particles themselves, repeating the cycle. When enough particles of a similar nature are in close quarter, They behave as a medium, and the entire motion cycle repeats itself on this higher level of magnitude, with these larger units now acting as the foundation units, again applying the ideal field model in a recursive manner. In this way, particles and corresponding mediums become increasingly more complex, and soon it is better to call them systems as opposed to units or particles. To illustrate, observe image 20. Imagine A as the fine ZP energy units composing all things, B as larger units like strings, C as even larger units like the electron, and D as even larger units like atoms. A creates B, creates C, creates D, etc. Each new system acts as an ideal field cycle in smaller and smaller magnitudes. The entire image is the first and largest ideal field cycle. Thus, all things within it are its energy density fluctuations, propagating from the prime mover back to its potential void, which are practically one and the same. One can now see the universe as a sea of recursive energy density fluctuations caused by the motion of the prime movement, to which all things will return. Note, the shape of image 20 has no significance. It is merely a simple example of recursion. For further detail, all bodies within the D system would operate under the influence of the forces of D, C, B, and A, while system C's bodies would operate under C, B, and A, and likewise system B's bodies would operate under only B and A, while all things would operate under A. It is in this way that all things, ZP energy, are always traveling towards the initial potential void, even though they may get caught up as bound energy in countless minor cycles form for a time. Important note on energy density. This paper deals primarily with energy density, not to be confused with common material density. E equals mc squared shows that matter is energy. Thus, material density is a measure of energy. However, energy density is the sum of this material density and all other acting energies, such as charge, temperature, spin, etc. Therefore, a stationary object's energy density increases as it is set into motion because of the kinetic energy transferred to it. The same is true if an object is heated. Its material density may lessen as it expands, but its total density has potentially increased depending on the degree of expansion. To illustrate, picture a stationary diamond, then a spinning diamond, then a heated spinning diamond, each having progressively more total energy per unit space. To illustrate further, imagine all of the circles of image 20, spinning counterclockwise, and also spinning all of the circles that they contain. Being that motion is transmittable and cumulative, the forces in one system cannot be fully understood without knowing the forces of the containing system, the medium. For example, if the spin of D was measured and then D stopped spinning, it would still continue to move on the parameters of C, B, and A. So by measuring only the spin of D, one would not have accounted for all of the energy within that particle or system. By neglecting this, one would end up with a great deal of missing energy.